So after law school, where do you go?
I took the job that paid me the most amount of money. Yeah, I did. Listen,
It's a
there's no use.
marketplace, right?
It's a marketplace, man. At the time, first year associates coming out to elite firms were making a buck 85 a year. Now they make 265, if you can believe
Mhm.
it.
It's
Yeah.
a big deal.
So it's a really big deal. And here's the thing, sometimes you need to communicate and or connect with people whose interests are counter to yours, or with
Completely.
people, yes, or
Like,
with people who are
right?
hostile to you.
Right.
Other
Opposites.
times, other times it's with your team, or it's with your spouse, or it's with your next door neighbor whose
Yeah.
construction is driving you mad, right? So more in a repair capacity. And my mom, the only job she could get, given her experience and her total lack of linguistic skills, was to sell carpet at a carpet store. And so my parents were a salesman and a repair guy, basically. And they hit some hard times and they were having a hard time finding work. It's a fashion house.
Mhm.
And so it was a lot of fashion work, it was a lot of spirits work. And because it was fashion work and spirits work, even though I was a litigator, it also involved a lot of trademark related questions.
Mhm.
And so I was also involved in a lot of transactional issues as well, particularly as it related to taking a look at the mark before the transaction occurred. And
Did you know there's a technology that's actually an app on your phone that uses sound waves to tell your brain what you want your brain to do? We had a young man that was on a guest on our podcast, the Mike Litton Experience, who had a traumatic brain injury. He was sleeping 3 hours a night. He's using NewCalm now and he's sleeping more. Go to newcalm.com, Mike15 promo code. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. Mike is passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
Shermin Kruse, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. And like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So, with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go up to today, and then we want to talk about stoic empathy and all the amazing things that you're doing to help leaders around the world.
I appreciate it. I'm excited for the conversation.
Thanks for being here. So, where were you born?
I was born in Tehran, Iran.
Wow. Did you grow up in Tehran?
I did. Yeah, I was born there and I was born in 77
Hmm.
and I was there until 88. So I was there until I was 11 years old. And that time period that I was there was also immediately post-revolution. The revolution occurred in 1979. And then it was also during the Iran-Iraq War,
Right.
Iran and its neighbor Iraq war, in a protracted war that lasted approximately 10 years. So that was the core of my childhood.
Wow. So, what was your favorite thing about growing up in Tehran?
Oh God, I that's going to be really tough to say. There was a lot of wonderful things. I mean, I would say one of my uncles was a fruit merchant and he
Mhm,
had orange farms, and it was during a war, and so fruit was very difficult to come by, but we always had oranges because of him,
mhm.
and sometimes even other fruit from the fruit market. Family, dancing, music, my mother's cooking, familiar smells, the scent of jasmine, tea in the morning. There is more than it's a spectacularly beautiful country, but more than anything, it's a sense of shared belonging and family connections that were my favorite thing. I was a child after all.
Mhm. That's awesome. It growing up, who was the most
Yeah,
influential person to you?
my mother.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hands down. So when you came to the
Yeah.
US, where did you go?
So I didn't come immediately to the US. We immigrated to Toronto, Canada. Canada
Okay.
was the country that took us in. We were landed immigrants, so we didn't come in with refugee status. We had permission to enter before arrival, which is a privileged position to be in.
Mhm.
So we arrived in Toronto, and I lived in Toronto sort of on and off until 1999,
Mhm.
at which time I came to the States for law school. And I moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan
Mhm.
to attend law school there. And that, as I said, was 1999. So I've been in America now for a protracted period of time. And I will say it's my favorite country in the world. I mean, and it's not because I was born into it or out of some, inherent sense of patriotism. I just really love living here. I think it's a fantastic country, and I'm a Canadian citizen as well, so I could return there, and I choose to continue to stay here
Mhm.
in the USA. And yeah, it's been a long journey.
Every time I leave this country, I can't wait to get back.
In fairness, that might be just because it's home. A lot of people feel that way about
It's also
home,
my
but
favorite country.
yeah,
It's also my favorite country.
it's a pretty good country. I agree. It's got tons of warts, but what doesn't?
So did you go to high school in Canada?
So yes and no. I started high school in Canada. I did it, and in Canada, high school starts at ninth grade and it
Mhm.
goes to 13th grade. So I did ninth and 10th grade in Canada. And then at that time, my father was a mechanical engineer and my mother was a stay-at-home wife, but had a degree in applied mathematics. After we immigrated, my father could really only get contract jobs, and often it was more technical positions and less sort of office positions, so more in a repair capacity. And my mom, the only job she could get, given her experience and her total lack of linguistic skills, was to sell carpet at a carpet store. And so my parents were a salesman and a repair guy, basically. And they hit some hard times and they were having a hard time finding work. And my family is extremely hardworking. I mean, when I tell you the ethic of work was drilled into me as a child, it couldn't be more true. One of my mother's relatives was able to offer him a 2-year position in his aerospace engineering firm, which would have been a great step for my dad, except it was in Lawrence, Kansas. So we had to get permission to enter and get the right visas. He was the only one who was allowed to work. The rest of us could live there. And we lived in Lawrence for 2 years. And that's where I graduated from high school. But then we moved back to Canada and I attended university in Canada at the University of Toronto.
So you chose the University of Toronto because it was where you were living, or did you choose it for a different reason?
Well, it's like the Harvard of Canada, and I didn't have any
Oh, wow.
status in the States at that time, and so we Canada made perfect sense, and
Sure.
it's a perfectly lovely country, and the education there is great. And I ended up studying neuropsychology and philosophy
Mhm.
with an emphasis on logic, and so it's the best I mean, it's an incredible philosophy program. I mean, I'm partial, obviously, because I'm an alum, but yeah, I had a remarkable 4 years there, and I then moved to the States and started law school there, and eventually became a citizen here.
So you mind if we go back just a bit? So in high
Never mind at all.
school, did you have a favorite subject?
Yes, I did. My favorite subject by far throughout my entire tenure at high school was a class that was simply called Humanities.
Mhm.
It was taught by a teacher, Art something. I forget his last name. I've tried to locate him since then. I've been unsuccessful. I went to a My high school was the only high school in Lawrence, Kansas at the time I went there. And if I can be super direct with you and your audience,
Absolutely.
we had a parking lot that was called the Hick Lot, and you couldn't park there unless you drove a truck and had a Confederate flag on it. We had a stairway called the Black Stairs, and you couldn't go up and down those stairs unless you were black, or you would get pinched or prodded or grabbed. Uh, I feel impolite using this word because I'm on a podcast, but I was a sand N word there in
Oh,
Lawrence, Kansas. So, which is a term that I had not heard before that. So it was a very odd and unusual place for a handful of Iranians to end up, and it was a very odd and unusual experience. And the high school didn't offer any AP classes. It was not a fancy academic high school, but Art, whatever his last name is, was offering his humanities class. And that humanities class involved massive readings from around the world, including some remarkable Russian literature. And that's when I fell in love with humanities.
beautiful. Did you have a
Yeah.
favorite teacher in high school?
Well, it would be Mr. Art something,
Was
but
it?
again, I don't remember his last
That's okay.
name.
That's okay. You don't have
He
to.
was
It's
quite
good.
he was quite a burly man. He had a huge beard. He was massive. I mean, massive person and brilliant. I wish I could find him.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So after high school, you go back to Canada and you attend University of Toronto.
Do.
Did you decide to go to Toronto in addition? Were you thinking about law at the time?
Well, initially, to be honest, I was mostly enthralled by global politics and world politics. So I was initially interested in political science, turned out to be really boring for me. So when I switched to philosophy and neuropsychology, I did sort of have law at the back of my mind, but I was also considering just continuing my education in philosophy.
Mhm,
Philosophy was really my passion when I was introduced to it. Again, the introduction sort of came at an earlier time back in high school and maybe even prior to that back as a child in Iran. But when I was formally academically introduced to philosophy, it really became my passion and it became my zest. And also, I discovered my gift.
mhm,
This is an area where I just understood
mhm,
things. And there were many areas where that was not the case. And so I was passionate about that. But listen, I mean, again, just because I want to be candid with you and your audience, I
mhm,
grew up poor. I mean, we left everything behind. We moved to Toronto. I grew up in mixed income housing. I was able to go to some good schools, but didn't really have an easy time growing up financially. I mean, I was never hungry, and I always had my mother's amazing, delicious homemade food. So I always had organic, all before organic was a thing. It was all
mhm,
all organic, all homemade food, but I was often cold. You know what I mean?
mhm,
That's a sort of like a good marker of how broke someone is. Are they hungry? No. Is it because they're eating junk? No. But are they cold in the winter?
mhm,
Yes.
mhm.
So yeah. So that was my childhood. And you know what? I was fascinated by global politics, by philosophy, by psychology, by human history, by the arts, but I wanted to make money.
Mhm,
I never wanted to be cold again.
mhm,
And I didn't want my kids to be cold when I had them, and I wanted to take care of my parents, and I want them to have some level of stability in their lives, and I wanted to have some stability in my life. So when push came to shove, I wrote the LSAT, the law school admissions test, and I found it to be super fun.
mhm.
And so I assumed law school would be super fun, and that is why I ended up attending, because I thought it would be a fun way to do something that makes decent amount of money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you apply to University of Michigan law,
Hmm.
you get accepted, you move to
Hmm.
Michigan, to Ann Arbor, Michigan. You're a Wolverine now, right?
Yeah.
Right? I get
Uh,
it.
uh,
I get the
I mean,
loyalty thing. I gotta
I'm a
go blue, all
Canadian
that, right?
Wolverine. So,
What's that?
yeah, I mean, I'm a Canadian Iranian Wolverine.
That's right.
So, and it was like I was in law school when 9/11 occurred. Like the football and basketball was the furthest thing from my mind.
Oh, no,
But
no.
there was a lot.
I wasn't
Yeah.
suggesting that you're a sport fan, but every
Yeah.
Michigander that I've ever met, every alum
Yeah.
from the University of Michigan is, go
Go
blue,
blue.
and they're
Yeah.
diehard loyal, right? Just like you are. I mean, that's a really cool thing. So you graduate from law school. What
Yeah.
what was the single most important thing you learned attending law school at University of Michigan?
Wow, that's a tough one. It was a remarkable time of education for me. I also got divorced during that time.
Oh, sorry.
So it was, and it was also an extraordinary learning experience. I
Mhm,
had married my first husband when I was only 19,
mm,
and he was in the US and I was still in Canada. And I moved to the States mostly to be with him, not just to attend law school. And so when the marriage failed, it was a challenging time. Also being Iranian and having a failed marriage. I mean, it's really, divorce was rather unacceptable. I was the first person in the family to get a divorce in the whole extended family, out of all the cousins, out of everybody. And so there was a lot of education to be had. As I mentioned, it was also during 9/11.
mm,
I suppose the greatest single biggest thing that I learned, and I hope you take this in the spirit with which it was intended. On the morning of 9/11, I was driving to school when I found out about it,
mhm,
and I'm slightly embarrassed to say that I was listening to the Howard Stern show. This is back when he was on regular
mm,
regular radio. As I was a fan of the show at the time, not a fan now, but I was a fan at the time. I thought the guy was smart and funny.
mhm,
And, I was a 20 something kid.
mhm,
And so I was listening to Howard Stern, and he's the one who like broke the news for me,
mm,
right? I get to law school. The first class I have is taught by Catherine McKinnon. It's called Sex Equality. She's one of the foremost feminists of our time. And fascinating that I would have her class right after listening to Howard Stern, but that was me. I was always sort of a riddle wrapped in a conundrum. And and so we walk in, and it's a very somber. I mean, we don't really at that point know yet what is going on or what is happening or what the fate of our nation will be. And she stood in front of that classroom with such grace, wisdom, and composure. And she gave us some advice that has stayed with me to this day about preserving judgment, preserving anger, preserving hatred, and responding to the situation with calm, rational wisdom.
mm,
And she's the only person in that moment who was speaking in that way.
mm,
Everyone else, including me, was really quite anxious and
mhm,
hysterical. And we didn't even know if the attacks had stopped at that time. I mean,
mhm,
we didn't, and so it was, and then everybody had friends in New York, and I had already gone through the worst part of my separation, and so I was seeing someone who was flying to and from one of the flights that very well could have been one of those flights. And so one of my best friends lost her brother, a Cantor Fitzgerald. So it was a very, very odd time. And the fact that she was able to stand in front of the classroom with such dignity and speak to us about the dangers of what lay ahead,
mm,
given the danger we felt,
mm.
right? Because there's nothing like feeling endangered that causes someone to make mistakes
Yeah.
in how they react, or to react rather than appropriately respond. And I had learned about this growing up during a war in Iran too, just the idea of separating a people from a population, the idea of being careful that fear doesn't drive you to a place that you would regret, right?
Mhm,
Like your own moral character would at a later time regret. And I just thought that was extraordinary. And it really stayed with me. But I mean, it was an American law school. So I got to learn about the philosophy of law and history of legal reasoning and the United States Constitution and the United States founding. And, it was an extraordinary time of growth and learning. But if I was going to identify one moment, that would be the moment.
awesome. So after law school, where do you go?
I took the job that paid me the most amount of money. There was a yeah, I did. Listen,
It's a
there's
marketplace, right?
it's a marketplace, man. At the time, first year associates coming out to elite firms were making $1.85 a year. Now they make $265, if you can
Mhm.
believe it.
I
But
can
at the
believe it.
time, Yeah, but at the time, $1.85 was the highest, and that was the job I wanted. I will also tell you, I lost a couple of jobs by virtue of my ethnicity.
Mm,
There was a couple people who had raised safety and security risks, which to me seemed absurd. But again, these are the things that fear does to you in that climate. And so my options were more limited than my pedigree would have predicted. But I ended up with a top paying job at a great firm. I ended up there because the folks who took me to lunch at my interview were it was a conservative Jewish guy and a born again Christian, and then me, the Iranian, right? And we just had the best lunch. I mean, these people just talked about who they were and what they
mhm,
believed, and they debated me, and I was still sort of in that law school mind frame of,
mhm.
hey, let's just hash this out like we're
Bring
three
it
human
on.
beings.
Yeah, bring
Yeah.
it on.
Like
Right.
we're three human beings that just happens to be true, right? We are
Hmm.
in fact three human beings who are maybe going to work at the same law firm, certainly
Hmm.
going to live in the same city, and have a core set of beliefs in common. So let's have this conversation. And it was, and I ended up sort of being close to those two people throughout my career, although we never ended up becoming best friends. We did often do a shot of tequila together at firm parties and toast to world peace. And it was a fascinating dynamic. And I thought, this is the place for me. They're offering me the most amount of money. They have some like actual humans there instead of like,
Hmm.
corporate suits who are just being polite and feeding me this line or that line about, DEI or whatever it was they wanted me to hear at that time. And this was the place for me. And I stayed there almost 20 years,
That's
actually.
awesome. What
Yeah.
type of law did you practice?
I practiced complex commercial litigation, which essentially means I was a litigator in cases for large corporations, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 corporations. I worked primarily for the LVMH house, which is the Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy house. It is the world's largest fashion house.
Hmm.
And so it was a lot of fashion work, it was a lot of spirits work. And because it was fashion work and spirits work, even though I was a litigator, it also involved a lot of trademark related questions.
Hmm.
And so I was also involved in a lot of transactional issues as well, particularly as it related to taking a look at the mark before the transaction occurred. And so that was my world. It was high level fashion, it was first class tickets to Europe, that was the world. I learned a lot about the corporate world during my time, and more than anything, especially going U of M is a very, very left-wing school. So going to U of M, you sort of come out thinking certain things about the corporate world, and being in it, you realize the world is a lot more complex than, what a hypothetical educational institution might have assumed. And there's lots of great people that work in this world, and there's lots of interesting work being done here. And it was a fascinating, that was also a fascinating education for me, and just really like coming to love not all, but some of my clients, and who their artists were and who their corporate executives were, but also, seeing behind the scenes some of the
Hmm.
crap that I'm sure you can imagine exists in the fashion industry. And what has to be dealt with. And it was eye-opening.
So a couple of things. Number one, we're taping this currently on June 4th of 2025. And
Mhm.
our little podcast that's not 2 years old yet, it'll be 2 years old on August 15th, has over 3.2 million views. And I'm telling you that not to impress you, but to impress upon you, we're actually in 64 countries, including Iran. So to think that we're listened to in 64 countries
Amazing.
boggles my mind. It absolutely boggles my mind. The thing
Yeah.
about it is, I'm not sure everybody that's listening knows what a litigator is. So would you take just a real quick second and explain what a litigator is?
Those are the people you pay to argue.
You pay him to go to
So
court,
you
right?
pay him to go to court. That's
Yeah,
exactly right. Although
yeah.
at my level, you're hardly ever in court. You're mostly just arguing amongst one another. So basically, you can divide civil lawyers. So
Mhm,
criminal lawyers are a different thing, but you can divide civil lawyers into two categories.
mhm,
One category is transactional. These are the guys that negotiate the agreements.
right.
The other category is litigation. These are the guys that come in when the agreement SHIT hit the fan and the
Right,
two sides don't like each other anymore and
and
they're
it's
going
time
to
to
the
fight.
mattresses. That's right.
Right.
So these are the people who are not afraid of confrontation. These are the people who can think on the spot. Maybe they don't pay attention to every comma or detail in an agreement, but they sure as heck can rip them apart in
Mhm,
post and figure out how to dissect them in a way that works for their story. And I always like to joke that in litigation, there's always two sides. There's always two sides, but my side is a little bit better than your side.
mhm,
And my job is to convince the judge or the jury or even you or your
mhm,
client, right? That my side is the better side. So I have to tell the story in a manner that requires me to understand my audience and then to convince my audience of something they are not currently convinced of.
mhm,
There is no preaching to the choir in this work. And it's almost always, because it was corporate litigation, it was almost always corporation versus corporation. So
mhm.
it would be Shell Oil versus Chevron, or it would be Louis Vuitton versus Dooney and Burke. It would not be Louis Vuitton versus sweet little old lady who fell outside Louis Vuitton store.
Mhm.
That was handled by a very different group of
Yeah,
lawyers that we didn't go anywhere near that work. It was all higher level corporate litigation work.
gotcha. Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure for anybody that's listening that wasn't sure what that meant. The other thing that I'd
Thank you.
like to get into is in order to do what you did as a litigator and do it for 20 years, you have to be good at conflict, number one, but you also have to be good at conflict resolution and you
Yeah.
have to be good at persuading. And a big part of persuading is what we call sensory acuity. Will you take just a second and explain what sensory acuity is? The reason why I'm leading up to this is you wrote a book called Stoic Empathy, and it
Yes.
really talks about knowing people. And a big
Yeah.
part of your practice now, so this is where we're going with this. A big part of your practice now is helping people to communicate and to connect with other people.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
So it's a really big deal. And here's the thing. Sometimes you need to communicate and or connect with people whose interests are counter to yours, or with
Completely.
people, yes, or
Like,
with people who are
right?
hostile to you.
Right.
Other
Opposites.
times, other times it's with your team, or it's with your spouse, or it's with your next door neighbor whose
Yeah.
construction is driving you mad, right? But who you love and have
Mhm.
loved for years, ever since the time they found your dog after the dog got out, right?
Yeah.
And so the reality is there's all sorts of people with whom we have to communicate
Mhm.
and or i- convince, regardless of how we feel about them or what the
Mhm.
relationship is. There's certain truths that must be met. The initial truth is we must understand them.
Mhm.
If we can, and the better we understand them, the more likely we are at the communication or the confrontation
Mhm.
or the convincing,
Yeah.
right? Now, it does make a difference who they are. Obviously, it does, because that's where our emotional connection to them varies.
Mhm.
That's where some of the strategies we take might vary. But nothing changes the fact that we must be aware at all times. And so, some of the things that I became really good at in my advocacy work, and then also in my conflict resolution work, and then also in my in my convincing the world to come to my point of view work, is how to read the room. How do I
Mhm.
listen? How do I gather information that I did not have before walking into this room? So the game is very different. The game isn't to show up in front of a judge and prove to the judge you're smarter than the other guy. This game is about showing up and gaining information that you did not have before you showed up about the judge, right? Or about the other side. And so it's the game is far more about listening than about talking.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And it's the key to everything. And when we come back, we're going to talk about some things out of Stoic empathy that people can take away and use today, literally put into practice today to make their lives better. We'll be right back. Did you know there's an app that has no side effects that allows you to use sound waves to tell your brain what you want it to do? It's called newcalm.com and it's amazing. It literally uses sound waves. If you want to tell your brain to go to sleep, if you want to tell your brain to recover, if you want to tell your brain to put you in peak physical state, if you want to tell your brain to focus, if you want to tell your brain to take a power nap, you can do all of these things and more with newcalm.com. Go to newcalm.com today, promo code Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go there today. So we're back with Shermin Kruse and the author of Stoic Empathy. And we were just talking about how important it is to be able to read the room, how important it is to be able to, and I probably should share this with you because it's making me
You've
smile.
got to
Well,
do
it's
it
making
now.
me
Yeah.
smile. I mean, I can't help myself. Okay. So
Okay.
you don't know this about me, but all my life I have dreamed of attending Stanford University as a student.
I mean, who hasn't?
I'm 58 years old. I'm 58 years old. And it sounds
All
like
right.
my window is shrinking, right?
No, it's not. My plan
So
for my PhD's in my 50s. So
yeah.
you're spot on. Stanford's waiting for you.
So I'm in Palo Alto talking to you
Okay.
right now. Okay.
Okay.
And I'm up here because I was invited by a public speaking professor at Stanford to address their party at the end of their semester for their public speaking class. And it was last night. And it was absolutely amazing. And the one thing that they kept talking about that was a running theme in their class was romancing the room. As a speaker, you romance the room. The
Oh, I love
only
that.
way you could romance a room or anybody is by being able to get to know them, right?
Yeah.
And finding out about them and pulling them to you. Okay. And so one of the things that happened last night was they asked me to give a toast, and they gave me 2 minutes to give the toast. Okay. 2 minutes. It takes
Yeah.
me 30 minutes just to introduce myself. Okay. So I pointed that out to them
Okay.
when I got up to do the toast. And I said, listen,
Right.
I'm going to give you two things because everywhere I go, I try to add value. I don't care where it
Yeah.
is. It could be the gas station. Okay. I'm trying to add value everywhere I go. It's part of who I am. I don't know
I love
how
it.
else to be. But one of the things that I know that's absolutely imperative is that we know ourselves. The better we know ourselves and what our behavioral tendencies are, the better we can romance a room, the better we can address people and help them. So what I told them was this. I said, I'm going to give you two pieces of advice that you can take away from tonight. Number one, if you have stage fright, if you have butterflies, if you feel like you've got heart palpitations, cold sweats, whatever you want to call it, right? Stage fright. Here's what works for me. I found out years ago, I had an epiphany backstage before I was supposed to go out and speak. And I realized that if I loved the people in that audience more than I loved how I looked doing it, we were going to be fine.
Oh, I love
Okay.
that.
That was number one. Number two, I told them, I said, what you should do, because this is the advice I gave my 24 and 26-year-old, was you should go to a Word document or Microsoft Word or your word processor or whatever it is, bring up a blank document. At the top of it, in the largest font you can get, type out stay in curiosity. At the bottom, type out stay out of judgment.
Yeah.
Print it and put it up where you work, literally right in front of where you work. So you see it several times a day. And the idea behind it is this: we're not curious enough about each other, and we don't ask about each other anymore. We're in our cocoon. It's what Faith Popcorn talked about in the Popcorn Report back in the 90s. We're
Yeah.
building moats around us. Okay. We're in our cocoon and we're not engaging the people around us. So full disclosure, I'm writing a book on the power of questions, and I'd love to interview you for the book if you don't mind.
Oh,
The
I
thing,
love it.
the thing about it is, if we start engaging again, if we start asking, if we care enough to ask, our lives will be enriched in ways you cannot imagine. If you look back at the last 20 years of law, how many questions did you ask? There were a ton. and you literally garnered that information about the judge, about the other side, about opposing counsel, about
Mm-hmm.
everybody,
Mm-hmm.
defendants, right? The whole thing, plaintiffs, the whole thing, from the questions you asked. And
Yeah.
specifically the answers they gave to those questions, right? And then you asked questions, I guarantee it, based on the answers they gave you. We call it piggyback questions. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like it's important that people understand that's a big part of what Stoic empathy is. Stoic empathy is about how you can connect, and you've literally lived this. You've literally lived this. And so now you're taking that expertise and going out and showing people that they really can do what Scott Mann talks about all the time, connect like your life depends on it.
100%. Well, I love that so much. It's so profound and it's so potent. So, yes. And you can ask questions without asking questions. You can
Yeah.
ascertain information without even opening your mouth. And when you do ask questions, it matters how you ask the
Mhm.
questions. So, one of the things I talk about in the book is this is what I do if I'm cross examining a witness, because I want to back them into a corner into saying what I want them to say, right? But it's not what I do if I'm actually trying to get information out of someone.
Mhm.
The investigatory methods of the FBI differ vastly from how you would cross a witness.
Mhm.
And what's interesting is the rest of us who aren't in the FBI or aren't trained by SWAT on interrogation techniques, we walk around and when we feel threatened and when we feel someone's hostile to us, we come at them with
Mhm.
defensiveness and
Mhm.
threats and
Mhm.
hostility. That's not how you get information.
Mhm.
And so you have to be extremely careful how you modify and phrase your questions and even go back to, do I even need to ask these or do I just need to, as you said, Mike, just reserve judgment?
Mhm.
And again, that doesn't mean there aren't bad guys in the world. I'm not
Mhm.
telling you there are. I grew up in the Islamic Republic of Iran. There
Mhm.
are some bad guys in the world.
Mhm.
Okay. I've looked evil in the eyes. It exists. Okay. The reality, though, is that when I look at that morality officer who's trying to arrest me and my mom because we don't have our headscarves on properly on the streets of Iran, I'm a child. She's got this huge Russian style assault rifle hanging across her shoulder, and her only job is to enforce the moral code of the Islamic Republic of Iran as they have determined it to be. I know that she's not my friend. I
Mhm.
know that the goal isn't, there are certain judgments that I can make, right? But
Mhm.
I don't know that she's a horrible human being. I just don't. What I do know is that she has a very counter worldview to the one I
Mhm.
have, that she's tired, that
Mhm.
she's repeating this same crap over and over and over and over again, that she's tired of it, that
Mhm.
it's hot out, that her own headscarf must be hot and uncomfortable,
Mhm.
that at least a part of what's going on isn't just trying to educate me on morality, but also her frustration that she has to do something that I'm not doing.
Mhm.
Right. And understanding that gives me insight into how to get out of being arrested that day.
Mhm.
I mean, look,
Or
it's
shot,
or shot
right?
or tortured or
I
whatever.
mean, she's
Yeah.
tickling the trigger of an AK-47, and you're literally going, "Okay, I gotta figure out a way to survive this." And the
Yeah.
fact of the matter is, oftentimes, when you're dealing with somebody that's an enemy of yours, quote unquote, or a
Right.
threat of yours, quote unquote, a lot of times they've become that threat or become that enemy, not of their own accord. A lot
Yeah.
of times they've been forced there, right? Look at all the people who leave these,
Or at least educated there,
yeah,
manipulated
but
there,
all the people that
manipulated to.
escape, putting their life on the line, literally
Um,
threatening their own lives to leave, to escape Sharia law, right? To
yeah.
escape a lot of these just awful, awful regimes that have these incredibly terrible medieval type requirements, moral requirements. That's one of the things that people need to understand. Some of the first people that bail are the people that have that AK-47 strapped on their shoulder. Okay, because they've had it, man. They're out of here. They've been doing all this stuff that's out of their, sort of an out of body experience for them, and they're done. They're just done. And so the better we can do reading that empathy, the better we can do figuring that out and sort of peeling the layers back, the better chance we have of surviving and the better chance we have of thriving. 1000%. So I just
1000.
want people to understand you just have to care enough to ask, right? And you also have
Yeah.
to care enough not to hit fire with fire, right? So when people attack me, I'm one of the most boring people in the world to argue with. And I used to be one of the best debaters in the country, okay?
I
In the
believe it.
in the
I
nation.
was a debating champ, and I can tell
I was
from the way
very
you speak.
good.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah, you're
very
a good
good,
debater.
okay?
Yeah,
The
you're
thing
fast
about it
because you're
is,
fast. You're quick on your feet.
yeah, I can argue with the best of them, right? Especially if the hair on the back of my neck stands up, right? The thing about it is the thing about it is when I'm attacked, I don't attack back. I don't because they're looking for that. They're looking for you to return that energy. I'm not going there. Okay? I'm not
Yeah.
going there. I'm just going to let them run out of steam, which they will eventually. And then once they run out of steam, they'll ask me something really intelligent like, "So what do you have to say for yourself?" And I'll just say, "I'm really sorry you feel that way. I really am."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they have nowhere to go. I'm a cul-de-sac, baby. They got nowhere to go. They're just going to do this. Okay.
They're just going in circles.
Yeah. And what I want people to understand is that's by design. Okay. It's by design. It's a learned behavior. It's a muscle that you have to work. Right. Just like asking questions. Asking questions is a muscle that you have to use. But the
Yeah.
fact of the matter is, you're never going to romance a room if you don't love the room first.
Yeah, and what makes what you're saying so brilliant and so intuitive and so insightful is the notion that empathy does not equate to compassion
Mhm,
or sympathy or alignment
mhm,
or justification. Okay. Empathy is understanding. Now, it could involve a matter of emotional connection, right?
mhm,
But even then, it doesn't necessarily equate to alignment,
mhm,
right? So I could be watching a TV show of a character who I love, but I also hate, and the character out of nowhere gets killed. I don't know, maybe it's Game of Thrones or something. And I flinch, right?
mhm,
I flinch. My body physically reacts to the fictional character to whom bad things are happening on television because my nervous system feels a pain response, right?
mhm.
Or a fear response or an anxiety response in response to that, right? That doesn't mean I like that guy.
Mhm,
First of all, I mean that's a fictional character, but like
mhm,
it doesn't even mean I like the character. It just means I emotionally connected with the
right.
character, right? And that emotional connection can exist or not exist, right? It can never fully not exist unless you're a psychopath or a robot, but you can vary the degree to which that exists based on the nature of the relationship. So that if it's my kid, my teenager, having a hard time communicating with me at home, I have a different approach, even if she comes at me in a very hostile manner,
Mhm,
because this is a relationship I want to have for the rest of my life.
mhm,
It's very different than dude in the marketplace trying to sell me something for twice what it's worth, who I'll never see again. Right?
mhm,
It's a very, very different encounter and a very different experience. So the questions I ask are different, but either way, I approach with curiosity.
right.
Either way, I approach with understanding. Either way, I approach with a quest for knowledge. I love what you said about how you come out on stage. And I never thought about it this way before. And I think it's going to be transformative for me. You come out on stage thinking more about connecting with your
Mhm,
audience than about how you look. And by the
mhm,
way, I put my lipstick on super last minute because I was running late for this podcast and I didn't get to put any other makeup on. And until you said that, I was thinking, oh, I wish I'd put more makeup on. And now I'm thinking, it doesn't matter how you look, Cher, just
mhm,
connect. Like, my version of it is a little bit different. I now have the benefit of yours as well. In my 20s, I was so anxious to prove to the world how smart I was, that I would I would come into a room ready to show everyone that I was the smartest
Mhm.
person in that room, right? And I could
Mhm.
do it by shutting you up or by outwitting you or by making fun of you or by doing any number of things.
Yep.
Right.
I had my
Punch,
dukes
punch,
up,
punch.
baby. I was
Right.
ready for you,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Right. But now I come into a room and I just want to leave it smarter than I walked into it.
Oh, yeah.
And that requires me to like learn something
Yeah.
from the room, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that I suddenly doubt my own intellectual capabilities. It just means I know for a fact that there are people in this room who have something to teach me. My job is to search for that something and to leave the room smarter than I entered it.
Yeah.
That is my job. And that is a very different job,
It
right?
is,
It's,
and you wanna
yeah,
leave them in a better place than where you found them, right? So, it's a big, big deal. One of the things we talk about a lot is connecting, and, one of the reasons we're writing the book, in fact, is because we've lost connection. We have these phones, we have these portable devices, we have all these things that we're building these moats around ourselves, and we're in a cocoon, and the fact of the matter is, so Scott Mann talks about in his book, Nobody's Coming to Save You, an example of this large Fortune 50 company that hired him to come to their annual meeting. And he's standing off stage, and the CEO gets up and says, I'm going to introduce our speaker in a second, but I've got a slide deck just to update you on how we're doing as a company. And he starts into the slide deck. 8 seconds later, everybody in the room's on their phone. Now, if I had had a chance to work with
wow,
him, he would have walked up and said, I have a question for you. I'm going to
right.
introduce Scott here in a second, and I have a slide deck here. You're on the front lines every day. You're the ones making this company successful. What do you think this update's going to say? How do you think
Yeah,
we're doing as a company? Does anybody want to take a guess? Nobody's on their phone.
right.
Shared, nobody's on their phone.
Nobody.
They're
Yeah.
if he's talking to one or two of them, the rest of them are rubbernecking trying to figure out if they know who it is that's talking to. I mean, come on,
Right.
right?
And pick
It's
me. Right.
engagement.
Right.
It's
Well,
engagement, right?
people want you to talk to them about them.
Yeah,
People don't want you to talk to them about you.
exactly. Exactly.
So you gotta talk to them about them. And by the way, people who are single and out there dating, this strategy also works for dating. Show up with interest and question, authentic interest and questions for the person across the table from you, and they will be putty in your hand
Yeah.
because that is what people want. People want to feel heard and valued, right? They don't want you thumping your chest at them. That's
Yeah.
not interesting to it. Might be, for 5 minutes, or if you're really famous, or if you are such and such, but then only it's so you can go tell your friends that you met this famous person.
Mhm.
Like it's only so that you can add that encounter to your list of things,
Mhm.
right? So this is the reality of life and of most people. And one of the things I love that you said, and you said it really early on in this podcast, Mike, was reserving judgment. And I just think it's so important to understand why.
Mhm.
It isn't because we can't make interim decisions about best ways to proceed based on the information that we have at our disposal. It is because we have to be careful that, as you said, that we know ourselves so that we know our own biases, so that we can prevent missing data, information, knowledge, wisdom, because we were too busy thinking 7 steps ahead based on how the last 7 conversations went.
Yeah.
Right. It isn't that we can't formulate an analysis of usually guys like this or like that. That's okay. Right. It's okay for you to come into a room and do a quick read, as long as you know yourself well enough to know where your weaknesses lie in that process and that you still leave room for potential errors
Mhm.
and go in there, and your quest is to detect, not to argue. So as long as you do that, yeah, fantastic. Yeah,
Okay, so let's
this
talk
is
about
such a
this for
great
just a second because I know there's a bunch of
okay.
people listening to this podcast that are thinking about writing a book.
Okay.
Right? I
Do it.
know that. I
Yeah,
know that.
do it. My advice is to do it.
Yeah. So what was it that made you do it? In other words, did you just sit down one day and just start making an outline? Talk about the thought process, because there's a lot of people right now that are having this debate in their head about whether they're going to do this or not.
Well, I'll tell you, I wanted to be a writer my whole life. So for
Awesome.
me, the reason I wound up in the law was for the money. And once I bought my freedom, I was able to do what I wanted to do. I have two prior books. One of them is a fictional novel, and the other one is a textbook that's published by the law school where I teach now. And so this is my third book, but it's my first major publishing deal.
Hmm.
I will tell you this. This is what finally got me to write my first book. I realized I cannot write a great book. I must write a bad or mediocre book, then edit it until it is great.
Get it out of the way.
Get the writing out of the way, y'all. Unless you're some sort of freak geniuses,
Mhm.
you will not be able to spew perfect sentences out of your head for the length of 350 pages.
Mhm.
It's just not something you're going to, and then interrelate them to one another and come back to the stories. It's just
Mhm.
not something you're going to be able to do. Just get the writing out of the way and then go back and revise.
Awesome.
And for me, that was a really, really helpful mind frame.
Mhm.
The idea that this is a first draft. And again, as a lawyer, I have training in that. I wrote a lot of briefs, a lot of appellate briefs, a lot of motions, a lot of things like that. And I learned this as a result of that practice and that experience. This idea that the first draft is just not going to be great,
Mhm.
even if I get it from a first year associate who just started working, right? But I'll make it better
Mhm.
because I know at the end of the day what's good and I should keep, and what's not great and I can do better.
Yeah.
And then once I have the pieces to my puzzle, I can make him glossier, I can make him shinier, I can make him connect. One of the things I do before I finish a book is I literally do a drawing. I'm not great at drawing, but I literally do like a stick man drawing on note cards, on flashcards of every scene or subsection of the book. And I lay them out next to each other so that I can visually see how it flows. And then I make some changes,
Mhm.
right? And so leave room for that and just start writing. Don't be afraid if it's not great. I promise you it will not be. Again, unless you are a freak genius, unless you're Charles Dickens, right?
Mhm.
He literally wrote this way. He wrote things, they came out of his brain, they became books. But
Mhm.
even let's look at another brilliant writer. Oscar Wilde would spend the morning putting in a comma and the afternoon taking it out.
Mhm.
Once you have that draft, it is yours to do with as you wish, right? And now you have written a book. It might not be great, but you wrote a book.
Mhm.
Okay. And it can always get better.
Mhm.
So then the next trick comes at finally pulling the trigger and saying, this is good enough.
Mhm.
And once you've made it there, and by the way, you don't have to be the one to decide. You can have a group of beta readers, you can have a group of friends. If you're working with a publishing company like I am, it can be your editor, it can be your agent, right? It could be people you've hired to look at your work. I mean, it could be any number of people, or it could be you who
Mhm.
just pulls the trigger and says, no, this is ready to go out. It's never going to be maybe what exactly you want it to be. I can't even go back and read my prior books. I just cringe the whole time.
Mhm.
Most of the world's most famous actors, actresses can't watch movies that they've
No.
been in.
Mhm.
They just it's a challenging thing to ask an artist to do. It's by the way, it's an important part of the process so
Mhm.
you can learn and grow. But it's a very challenging thing. Nobody thinks it's good enough. Just put it out there and then at some point pull the trigger. It's good. Get it out there.
Okay, Stoic Empathy, you can get at Amazon. Anywhere else?
You can get it anywhere that books are sold in the United
Barnes
States.
and
For the other
Noble.
64 countries, yeah, Barnes and Noble, your local bookstore. For the other 64 countries that are out there, you typically get it in any major book publishing chain. So if you're in Canada, they'll have it at Indigo. And Amazon, of course, it's one click of a button away. Go for it.
If somebody wants to hire your brilliant self, how do they contact you?
I am available for public speaking opportunities, and that is the extent of hiring myself right now, because otherwise I'd rather teach my students and fiddle around with my commas in the mornings and in the afternoons. But you can find me on my website, which is cleverly named after my impossible to pronounce and spell name, because that is how good I am at marketing. So
Mhm.
it's sherminkruse.com. You can also go to stoicempathy.com. I know these things are a little tough to spell, so Mike's going to have it in the comments section for you guys. Come and visit me. I'm also on LinkedIn and Instagram.
Sure, Cruz. Thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. This has been amazing. Absolutely
I had the
amazing.
best time. I had the best time. Thank you so much for having me on.
Can I ask you a question? Did you know that there's a technology that uses sound waves that'll tell your brain what to do? There literally is. It's called newcalm.com. It can tell your brain to heal, tell your brain to sleep, tell your brain to do all kinds of things. It can get you fired up. It can be a pre-workout. Newcalm.com. And the promo code is Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at the Mike Litton Experience.